is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Social media is changing everything in trade. Even reserved Britons are losing their traditional aversion to making a scene and using social media to complain about bad service provided by businesses. That's what a survey by the Institute of Customer Service suggests. They analysed data from 200 organisations, including banks, utility companies and retailers, and have concluded that customers now expect dialogue, not monologue, from companies. If a shop assistant was rude and the price a rip-off, the unhappy customer, especially the young one, will take to microblog sites to slag off that company. The trend has increased over the last few years. Thomas Brown of the Chartered Institute of Marketing observed in an interview that big companies had previously enjoyed a controlled conversation with customers via advertising, and for a long time, unhappy customers could only express themselves through letters or calling a customer relations team. But with the internet, it's a whole new ballgame. Which company can control online chat? Brown continues, now there's a risk that you could have a groundswell of customers talking to each other, and from the brand's perspective, it can get out of hand very quickly. Brown warns that there's a concern by businesses about the time and resources it takes them to properly manage social media. Big organisations which aren't monitoring it 24 hours a day could log off at the end of the trade day, only to log in the next morning to find that momentum has gathered behind a certain issue. But it's not all doom and gloom for businesses in this new era of intense connectivity. The old word-of-mouth recommendation has a new platform too. Perhaps it's more true today than ever before. A satisfied customer is a company's best advert.
Takeaway English
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English
From bbclearningenglish.com.
This time of year, many of us resolve to get back into shape. But if you're having trouble fitting into your tight jeans, it may not be your fault. Scientists now believe that willpower alone is not enough to lose weight. They say success depends on your genes, hormones and psychology. A study of 75 people by BBC Science and Oxford and Cambridge universities has looked into why one-size-fits-all diets are often not successful. The scientists divided overeaters into three groups: people who feast, people who constantly crave food, and emotional eaters. They tailored diets to the needs of each group. Feasters can't stop eating once they start. This is because they don't have the hormones that tell them when they're full. Scientists designed a diet for this group featuring high-protein foods that make them feel full for a long time. This included fish, chicken, basmati rice and grains. Bread and potatoes were not allowed because they do not fill you up for long. Constant cravers always feel hungry. Scientists say that certain genes disrupt the messages the stomach sends to the brain saying it is full, meaning the cravers always feel like they need more fatty, sugary food. Dieting 7 days a week is very hard for these people, so scientists put them on a normal, healthy diet 5 days a week and cut their calorie intake to 800 on 2 days a week. Emotional eaters have got into the habit of eating whenever they feel stressed. To help them change this behaviour, scientists offered them group support in meetings and online as well as a diet. During the study, people from all three groups lost weight on the tailored diets, with feasters losing the most and constant cravers losing the least. So what about you? If any of the eating habits sound familiar, perhaps you should consider a new approach to slimming for 2015.
Takeaway English
From bbclearningenglish.com.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Around the world, girls do better than boys at school. These are the findings of a recent study that looked at the test results of 1.5 million 15-year-olds in 74 regions across the globe. The level of gender equality in those regions made no difference to the results. Other factors, such as the income level of the region, also had little impact on the findings. In only 3 regions, Colombia, Costa Rica, and the Indian state Himachal Pradesh, was the trend reversed, with boys doing better. So what are the causes of girls' stronger performance? In the UK, girls outperform boys in exams that are taken at the age of 15 or 16 called GCSEs. According to education expert Ian Toon, this is down to the way girls and boys are brought up. Boys are encouraged to be more active from an early age, whereas the restless movements of baby girls are pacified. Hence, girls develop the skill of sitting still for longer periods of time, which is useful for academic pursuits like studying for GCSEs. He goes on to say that boys often cluster together in larger groups than girls. Because of this, they are more likely to be influenced by peer pressure and develop a gang mentality. He says that GCSEs require a lot of solo work and are not viewed as cool in a laddish culture. This is backed up by research in the UK that says girls are outperforming boys at the age of 5. So what is the answer? Should girls and boys be educated separately? Or do exams and school curricula need to be changed to better reflect boys' skills? These are the questions facing educators in many countries.
Takeaway English
from bbclearningenglish.com.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English
from bbclearningenglish.com.
Fashion and music are constantly looking back to the past. But would you be interested in retro video games? If so, you're part of a growing trend. Vintage video games are making their way back into living rooms. There is already a large market for 1970s and 80s games consoles. Despite their limited graphics and sounds, original machines by Atari, Nintendo and Sega command high prices. This year, a charity in the UK is hoping to cash in on this with the re-release of the hugely popular 1980s home computer, the ZX Spectrum. The new version has 1,000 games pre-loaded, a big change to the old machine that loaded games from a cassette tape. That process took several minutes and would often go wrong. In the United States, large numbers of gamers wanting a taste of 80s action are visiting beer and arcade game centres where they can drink and relive the games of their childhood. Our most popular games are the classics like Ms. Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, and also the multiplayer games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Simpsons, NBA Jam and X-Men, says Paul Kermizian, owner of one successful chain of arcades. Pinball goes even further back in time, but it's also enjoying a revival. New technology means contemporary machines have more features, but the gameplay has not changed. Pinball machine maker Gary Stern says people like playing because it's physical, more like a sport than a video game. Because of this, it's becoming popular with people in their 20s as well as older players. So, is it just nostalgia, or are older games more fun? Either way, with a new generation of fans, it looks like retro gaming is here to stay.
Takeaway English
from bbclearningenglish.com.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English
from bbclearningenglish.com.
Are bars places just to meet friends and chat casually about mundane things? Not anymore. Scientists have been organising periodic lectures and experiments in bars in several cities in 9 countries. In May, hundreds of them took part in a festival called Pint of Science. British neuroscience researcher Michael Motzkin started the festival with a colleague 3 years ago in the UK. But you don't have to be an egghead to follow a discussion. Motzkin says, "We asked top scientists to present their scientific discoveries in a down-to-earth setting over a drink or two. We want to give everyone a chance to pick the brains of the UK's most brilliant academics away from the stuffy laboratory or lecture theatre." And what do they discuss? Topics range from dark matter to climate change. The science in films such as Star Wars, Star Trek and Interstellar has also proved popular. And a young physicist even demonstrated how a model of the universe can be built from plastic Lego bricks. An audience with a taste for a more practical experience might enjoy the lecture given in a pub in Soho, central London. It was about the effects of beer on the human body. One might argue that a bit of alcohol helps people relax, freeing their imaginations so that they are better able to contemplate the wonders of the universe. That would make the pub the ideal venue for science, and a handy place to be if you make a big discovery and want to celebrate. Back in the 1950s, scientists James Watson and Francis Crick announced their discovery over a pint at the Eagle pub in Cambridge. And what did they discover? Well, just a little thing called the double helix structure of DNA. It eventually won them a Nobel Prize. Champagne, please.
Takeaway English
from the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Where do you keep ice? In the freezer, of course. That's what scientists might have thought when they were looking for a safe place to store ice from mountain glaciers from around the world. They've decided to store ice in Antarctica because global warming is causing some of the glaciers in places like the Alps to melt. Jérôme Chapelaz of the French National Centre for Scientific Research is involved in creating an ice vault there. He says, "We are probably the only scientific community whose archive is in danger of disappearing from the face of the planet. If you work on corals, on marine sediments, on tree rings, the raw material is still here and will be for many centuries." And why do scientists need to study ice from the Alps, for example? Ice formed on the summit of a mountain is made of layers of snow accumulated over thousands of years. Trapped air bubbles contain samples of the atmosphere that existed when that ice was formed. Ice is a record of climate, according to polar oceanographer Mark Brandon from the Open University in Britain. He says, "We know carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is higher now than in the last 3 million years." Researchers use this kind of data to build computer models and try to predict what might happen in the future. The ice vault will be housed in a snow cave at the Concordia Research Station, which is operated by scientists from France and Italy. The ice samples will be sealed in bags and placed 10 metres below the surface at a constant temperature of -50 degrees Celsius. This will put the scientists' minds at rest. Commercial freezers break down, power failures happen, and losing the ice samples would be a disaster. Nobody wants to see a mine of scientific knowledge lost forever in a giant puddle.
Takeaway English
from the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English
from bbclearningenglish.com.
Many believe high heels make women look good. It's no surprise that the Cannes Film Festival's organisers seem to favour having stars walking up the red carpet in them. But all this glam comes at a cost. Wearing heels over 10 centimetres high can damage your ankles. A study by the Hanseo University in South Korea suggests that continuous wearing exposes women to the risks of strains and makes them prone to losing their balance. A total of 40 women who wear high heels at least 3 times a week took part in the study. The strength of their ankles was measured regularly, and 2 of the 4 main muscles became dominant after a period of between 1 and 3 years. It created an imbalance in their feet. Dr. Yong-Suk Ji from Hanseo University said that the habit of wearing heels can result in deformed feet, back pain and unhealthy walking patterns. He recommends women limit the use of these kinds of shoes and exercise their ankle muscles properly. High heels are considered by some sexy and feminine, but ironically the fashion started with men's feet. These shoes were a form of riding footwear and would be seen on the feet of 17th century Persian soldiers. Elizabeth Semmelhack of the Bata Shoe Museum in Toronto says, when the soldier stood up in his stirrups, the heel helped him to secure his stance so that he could shoot his bow and arrow more effectively. Before becoming a staple of modern women's wardrobes, high heels were used by Louis XIV of France. These shoes were status symbols. Let's face it, nothing screams privilege like uncomfortable, luxurious and impractical clothing. They say the wearer doesn't have to work in fields or walk very far. What do you think? Are high heels a symbol of women's elevation in society, or just something to be booted out of fashion?
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From BBC Learning English.
Should animals be entitled to the same rights as people? The question is not so outlandish. A judge in the US once suggested that chimpanzees had the right to habeas corpus. Judge Barbara Jaff was ruling on the case of Leo and Hercules. These 2 primates have their own lawyers, arguing that they should be moved from a university lab to an animal sanctuary. She did change her mind after a while. Animals have always intrigued us. Some people find them very intelligent and capable of friendship, jealousy and longing. That's enough to give them rights, isn't it? Not for people like Professor Carl Cohen of the University of Michigan. He says that rights are a concept special to the human moral code, and animals don't know anything about right and wrong. The academic points out, animals do not commit crimes, animals are not attacked for their moral views. In any case, humans have become more sensitive to animal suffering throughout the years. In 1999, New Zealand granted basic rights to 5 great ape species. Their use in research, testing or teaching was banned in a move seen as the greatest legal success in animal rights history. In 2002, in an unprecedented move in the European Union, Germany granted some rights to animals in its constitution. The ambiguous relationship between people and animals can be perceived in language. In English, the pronoun used for an animal is it, but many people refer to their pets as he or she. It makes them more of an equal to us. What do you think? Should animals have rights similar to humans?
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Children are hooked on computers. Some spend up to 6 hours a day on their gadgets. They can be playing games live with others elsewhere in the world, updating their status on social media, texting friends, or looking for the latest app to download to their tablets or smartphones. This worried Martin Strott. He's the headmaster of the Old Hall School in Wellington in the west of England. He was so concerned that he challenged his students to take part in a week of digital detox. Strott told the local newspaper the Shropshire Star, that he encourages the pupils to be computer savvy from a young age, but is concerned that too much screen time will affect the development of their social skills. He said that this over-reliance on digital devices erodes family time, and they're missing out on messages from body language and facial expressions from those around them. According to the headmaster, the parents are happy with the initiative. But what about the children? 9-year-old Fred usually spends around 2 hours on his gadgets at home after school and around 12 hours on weekends. For him, the digital detox experience was really hard. Fred spent it playing outside, especially cricket. He said that he'll probably engage in different activities from now on, but he did miss his phone and online games. The idea of keeping children away from their tech for a while to prevent addiction is not particularly new. There have been similar initiatives in the US, but are they effective in the long run? Well, even if kids go back to their gadgets, the hope is that at least they'll think about how they use their time. What about you? Do you spend too many hours hooked on your digital devices?
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
When looking at Western Europe, we don't usually think about poverty. But in fact, some people in modern-day Britain are so hard up that they can't afford to buy food. Back in 2008, the financial crisis caused a lot of redundancies. Then there were the cuts to the welfare system in 2013, which added to the problem, and many British people fell into debt. It's estimated that 500,000 people in the UK have turned to food banks just to get by. Steph Hagan, who works in a Nottingham food bank, says, "People do not go to a food bank because it's an open door. It's a case of they go to it because they need to. With our food bank, we're an independent one and we have limited stocks. Everyone who comes through our door has no income whatsoever. There are checks and referrals to make sure nobody is abusing the system. If a doctor or a social worker thinks someone needs to use a food bank, even for a short time, they can give them vouchers. Then the people in need take the vouchers along to the food bank and they get handouts for 3 days. Churches and individual donors provide most of the food in the banks, but some businesses might help out too." And what sort of food is offered in food banks? Hagan says, basically, we've got porridge. We do occasionally get fresh produce, but it's very rare, especially in the winter months. It's like tinned fruit, tinned ready meals. We have to give out no cooking food parcels because people can't afford the gas and electricity. Community spirit has a lot to do with food banks. Volunteers say they are a great meeting place for people who are lonely and depressed. And when facing a crisis, some beneficiaries might need to feed not only their belly, but also their soul.
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
How much empathy do you feel towards other people? If you saw someone fall off their bike in traffic, would you stop and help or just walk away? Many people would give in to apathy, go about their business, and just do nothing. So it was a big surprise when about 100 bystanders got together recently to move a bus in East London to help a cyclist trapped under it. A video of the incident went viral on social media. According to Zoheb, a driver who stopped his car to take part in the rescue, about 5 people gathered to move the bus. He says, "There was no chance we could do it. It was more an invitation for other people to help, really." The initiative paid off. Diners from nearby restaurants joined in. There wasn't much coordination, but it didn't take long to develop a collective understanding of what the objective was. Spontaneous collaboration among strangers doesn't happen often. People in a crowd are not sure what to do. They don't have a plan. It's one of the reasons bystanders often do nothing, according to Dr. Mark Levine, Professor of Social Psychology at Exeter University in Britain. The presence of others can inhibit you from helping, he says. The key to positive group behaviour and intervention, Levine explains, is building a sense of shared identity. Action has to be decided quickly, Levine says. The longer you leave it, the harder it is to make a decision. If you don't immediately act, then you kind of think, well, actually, I probably couldn't have done anything anyway. But the people who took the initiative, like Zoheb, might make a difference. The cyclist ended up in hospital, and the images of the collective effort might inspire others to more acts of solidarity.
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Sci-fi movies tend to capture children's imaginations and have long been part of students' excited chats in the schoolyard. But now, a scientific journal has urged at least one sci-fi movie to be shown in class by science teachers. Scientific papers published in the American Journal of Physics and in Classical and Quantum Gravity have seen merit in the way the movie Interstellar portrays wormholes. Dr. David Jackson from AJP said publishing this paper was a no-brainer. He added, "The physics has been very carefully reviewed by experts and found to be accurate. The publication will encourage physics teachers to show the film in their classes to get across ideas about general relativity." In fact, one of the executive producers of Interstellar was Kip Thorne, a professor of theoretical physics at the California Institute of Technology. For him, films such as Interstellar, Contact, and 2001: A Space Odyssey can inspire young people. Blockbusters are improving when it comes to portraying scientific theories. An initiative by the US National Academy of Sciences has been putting proper scientists in touch with movie people to achieve a better result, which is vital in the internet age. Interstellar's director Christopher Nolan says, "Consumers have a lot more immediate access to information. If you go and see a film about a particular subject, particularly a true life story, you can go home and look it up on Wikipedia and see if the basic things portrayed in the film are true or not. The same is true of science in the films." Professional scientists may no longer cringe in their seats when they watch sci-fi movies. Today, getting the science wrong is no longer an option.
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Have you ever been in a lift with the big cheese in your company? It happened to me a couple of times. And did I take advantage of the situation to deliver my elevator pitch? Not a chance. He was surrounded by people buttering him up all the way to the top floor. Lifts have an interesting history. Today, the more important you are, the higher you live or work. Penthouses have fantastic views for boardrooms and living rooms, but it hasn't always been that way. Before the days of lifts, richer people would often prefer to live on the ground floor. Poorer people lived on the upper floors, and they had to use the stairs. In any case, whatever your pay grade, the confined space of a lift makes for an awkward encounter. It's hard not to notice the uneasiness of a group of strangers in a confined space who have no time to develop any kind of bond. But if marketing people have their way, that's all going to change. Jason Whale, sales manager at Elevators Limited, says, "It's a very anxious experience the time you spend in a lift. If you have things around you, you take away that awkwardness. We all look at our phones sometimes, or look down at the floor. Well, surely it's better to look at advertisements on the walls." He sees a lot of potential in this box in which we spend a few minutes every day. Whale explains, as technology becomes slimmer and cheaper, there are so many different ways to enhance a lift with light boxes, with moving images, with television screens. It becomes quite exciting for us, and hopefully a little bit more interesting for the people who use lifts. Who knows what the lifts of the future will look like? Perhaps they will become the places where everybody wants to be. Time for a business meeting? Ready to party? Come on, everybody. Let's get into the lift.
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
What did you eat for lunch today? Did you choose this dish because it was healthy, cheap, or because it was just very tasty? Are you a fussy eater or an adventurous gourmet? I love exploring trends in food. Fusion cuisine is not for everybody. My Italian grandmother would turn her nose up in disgust at the thought of tandoori pizza with mango topping, but this marriage of tastes is perfectly fine in the 21st century. Chef and food writer Qing Huang, who presented a series on Chinese food for the BBC, is a fan of the movement. She says fusion has been happening for centuries, for as long as people have travelled, but with the internet and global travel, the exchange of ideas makes the process much faster. Wolfgang Puck is seen by many as one of the chefs who made fusion elegant. He cut his teeth in his native Vienna and made a name for himself when he opened his restaurant in Los Angeles in the 1970s. This European delved into Asian cuisine and became one of the first in a long line of celebrity chefs. He said in an interview with the Wall Street Journal that initially he got negative responses from traditional American Chinese restaurant owners, but he's not bitter. "I believe authenticity is about evolution, not repeating your grandmother's recipe," he explains. "Cooking is like painting or writing a song. Just as there are only so many notes or colours, there are only so many flavours. It's how you combine them that sets you apart." My granny's preference would be the slow food movement, founded by her countryman Carlo Petrini in the 1980s and still going strong. It seeks to preserve local regional cuisine and use of ingredients that are grown locally. Petrini wants to see farmers connected more directly with consumers. All these trends give us food for thought. We might be wasting an exciting opportunity to wake up our taste buds when we scoff a sandwich at our desks. Tomorrow, why not find an exotic restaurant and enjoy a feast? You dress trendy, so eat trendy.
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From BBC Learning English.
Are you one of those people who find the world of Western classical music a bit snobbish and inaccessible? The Proms, or the BBC Promenade Concerts, to give the world's largest music festival its full name, might help you change your mind. For 8 weeks every summer, the Royal Albert Hall in London opens its doors to all comers and puts on a music show that is varied and wide-ranging. Some music lovers want to get as close as possible to the conductor. They are happy to stand up to listen to orchestras and soloists playing symphonies, overtures and concertos by the world's top composers, all for just £5. The festival has been going since 1895 and has always tried to be informal and relatively cheap. The prommers, the classical music groupies who like to stand, typify this relaxed ethos. Before performances, they shout out jokes, and every time the lid of the piano is lifted, they shout "heave" in unison. One of the highlights of the proms is the last night, which has a worldwide screening. Popular classics are played while the prommers wave flags and sing along to the catchy tunes. The last night is so popular with audiences that a ballot has to be held several months in advance, so that everyone who wants a ticket has a chance of getting one. But it has been criticised by some for being too British and jingoistic. In recent years, the proms have grown, so they now include simultaneous screenings in other British cities, lunchtime concerts, talks, children's proms, film and rock music, musicals, Indian classical music, and even tunes from the BBC series Doctor Who. The expanding offer is proving popular with audiences old and new. Perhaps classical music isn't quite so elitist after all.
Takeaway English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From BBC Learning English.
Tired of your quiet routine? How about leaving your computer games behind and taking up an extreme sport? You can ride a bicycle, right? In that case, you're halfway to becoming a mountain biker. All you have to do is take your bike off the road and try some rough terrain. Mountain biking was developed in California in the 1970s and became an Olympic sport in 1996. In the London 2012 Games, athletes had to navigate a 4.7-kilometre track in less than 2 hours. Not challenging enough? Skydivers jump from aircraft at an altitude of 1,000 to 4,000 metres. You have to be fit, but there's no age limit with this sport. Dilys Price from Cardiff went on her first jump aged 54. The minute she came down, she wanted to go up again. "I was hooked," said Dilys. Some adrenaline junkies are even bolder. They've invented base jumping, in which people leap from tall structures such as buildings or bridges with a parachute. Many of their stunts aren't legal, especially in urban areas. Dan Witchells has jumped off the Shard, London's 310-metre-high skyscraper, 4 times. He says base jumping is scarier than jumping out of a plane. In a plane, there's no perception of height, but when you're standing on the edge of the building, you can see people and cars. It makes it very real. It seems there's no lack of imagination when it comes to risking life to look cool and get the heart pounding. Surfing, scuba diving, rock climbing. How about turning one of your chores into a daredevil pursuit? Extreme ironing isn't for wimps. Pressing your shirt on top of a mountain could be dangerous, depending on the mountain. Extreme ironing is said to have been created in the 1990s in the English town of Leicester by a man who saw a pile of wrinkled clothes and felt bored. That was Phil Shaw, who also won the only extreme ironing championships ever held in Germany in 2002. For him, the thrill of this sport comes from looking at the spectators' faces. Shaw says, sometimes they look confused, sometimes they laugh. It's fun to see how people respond to it.
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
Everybody has looked in the mirror at some point in their lives and thought they could do with a smaller nose or fewer wrinkles. Almost 10 million operations were performed in 2014, according to the International Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. Eyelid surgery topped the list of the 5 most popular procedures, which included breast augmentation and rhinoplasty. We hear a lot about cosmetic surgery these days, but what many people may not realise is that reconstructing someone's face has an ancient past. There are reports of treatments to restore a broken nose in ancient Egyptian documents. Considering that safe anaesthetics and antibiotics were only discovered in the 19th and 20th centuries, it was a truly painful and risky business to go under the knife in the past. But as far back as the mid-15th century, nose jobs were carried out using skin taken from the upper arm. Plastic surgery went through a revolution during World War I. The trenches protected the soldiers' bodies, but many who stuck their heads up were exposed to explosions. New techniques were developed by Harold Gillies, who ran a ward at the Cambridge Military Hospital in Britain, and later a whole hospital dedicated to helping disfigured soldiers. Many wounded men at the time couldn't stand looking at their own faces. There were no mirrors in the hospital. In parks near the hospital, some benches were painted blue to signal to patients with facial injuries they could sit there. And it was a way of telling local residents to prepare for the shock of seeing someone with a disfigured face. Plastic surgery has come a long way since then. It reconstructs what does need reconstructing, but it also makes people with no particular problems feel more confident. Bigger breasts, straight nose, facelift. In many cases, cosmetic surgery isn't a necessity at all, just a choice. But when done properly by capable doctors on patients who have a realistic goal, it's believed that plastic surgery can heal psychological wounds almost as much as physical ones.
Takeaway English.
From the BBC.
This is a download from BBC Learning English. To find out more, visit our website.
Takeaway English.
From bbclearningenglish.com.
You've heard of Charles Darwin, right? The celebrated scientist who proposed a theory of evolution. You might just about have heard of Alfred Russel Wallace, who co-authored, with Darwin, the revolutionary work On the Origin of Species, published in 1859. But what about Patrick Matthew? Patrick who, you might ask? Well, Darwin and Wallace got the fame, but Matthew did the legwork too. This British horticulturalist actually thought about evolution first, as Dr. Mike Wheel, geneticist at King's College London, explains. He says, Matthew published a brief outline of the idea of species being able to change into other species through natural selection. And he did that 27 years before Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. And they recognised that he did so, but other people since have simplified the story and tended to concentrate just on Darwin. So Patrick Matthew's relative obscurity may simply be down to us, the general public, wanting to simplify things. But Dr. Patricia Farah, senior tutor at Clare College, Cambridge, points out that Darwin's work might have received more attention because he had powerful friends. He brought his allies on board, she says. The academic explains that